Right, good morning everybody and welcome to our webinar this morning. My name is Susie Duncan and I am the Head of Marketing at Daydot. Today we're going to be talking about 2022 and digital trends. So I'll just kick straight off with my introduction. I know a few people probably will still be joining us, but we'll get on with that so that we don't lose time. We've got 4 people to get through presenting this morning. So some quick housekeeping. The session will be recorded and will be available on our website. So please do add questions to our Q&A throughout the session and we will answer those at the end. We also send you via email a short survey so you can feedback on your thoughts on the session and hopefully we can improve for next time. I'm going to do 2 slides very quickly about Daydot for those of you who haven't joined us before. So at Daydot, we deliver digital experience optimization through A/B testing. So no one can create a perfect website that just sits there and stays relevant. Continuous optimization is essential to keep up with the changing user expectations. I think we all know that. And you as brands want as smooth an online journey for your customers as possible. So what we do is superpower your customer data through research and DXO methodologies. We identify optimization opportunities and run A/B tests across your website and digital channels. So we do this without touching a line of code from your website. It's all done in an external platform. And our goal is to help you achieve your KPIs and unleash growth. So in a nutshell, that's Daydot. Here is just a little introduction with some starter packages that we do, just to give you an idea. Tier 1 on the left there involves a basic level of analysis on a landing page of your website, just the tip of the iceberg, to be honest. And then as you scale across the tiers there, we'll deliver more insights, more research, more recommendations. We aim for our clients to be doing at least 1 or 2 A/B tests a month and working up towards building experimentation roadmap. So if you want to get started with research or A/B testing, then of course, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. But enough about us, back to today. So I'm sure you've already aware of our speakers this morning. I won't go through every single one there. I'll kick straight off with our MD, Osh, who will be talking about first-party data. So Osh, over to you.
Great, thank you very much. Give me a second, let me just get my screen up. Great. So in terms of getting things off, so let's kind of walk through how to create and activate on a first-party data strategy and why that's important. I always like to kick off with a couple of stats first. So in terms of where things are at the moment, we have around, stats say 80% of customers say they would shop elsewhere if they did not receive a good customer experience. 90% of consumers say they'll offer first-party data if it would improve their experience. Brands who focus on optimizing CX see an average of 80% revenue growth, yet only 6% of brands are truly capable of delivering consistent customer experience. So let's start with some of the basics here, right? So first-party data is information a company can directly collect itself on a consumer. For a brand, this data could be personal identifier information such as name, address, email, or phone number. It can also be the technical identifiers such as cookies or mobile device IDs, as well as behavior and engagement stats. This information is it could be gathered from sales, surveys, lead gen forms, CRM, call centers, or analytics. Second-party data is where 2 trusted partners share their directly gathered information. And then third-party data is any information collected by an entity that doesn't have a direct relationship with the user. Often this third-party data is collected from a variety of websites and platforms and aggregated together by a third-party data provider. We've been using a lot of this stuff up until now to create really relevant, compelling experiences across multiple touch points, and we've become pretty adept at doing so. But things are changing. Users are demanding greater privacy, including transparency, choice, and control over how their data is used. And it's clear the web ecosystem needs to evolve to meet these increasing demands. That's also the goal of data protection regulations that have been created over the last few years. So looking at GDPR in Europe, CCPA in California. And one of the main purposes of this is to really inform users about what data is being used, and allow them to choose who to entrust their data to. So, Chrome is one of the latest browsers to look at, to plan on disabling third-party cookies. And whilst it's got the highest market share, 64, around 64%, Safari ranked second and Firefox ranked third. I've already started stopping tracking users via third-party cookies, and that's over a year ago. So really, we need to start to reimagine our relationship with data, and in order to scale engagement across all of your tools and your channels accurately and with consent, you need to rethink the kind of data you're using, how you're collecting it, how it's distributed, and how you keep it secured. And in order to do this, your organization needs to create an overarching data strategy. We're going to look at some of the ways that you can start to build on this, start to work towards that data strategy, and then we'll look at some ways that you can start to activate on that and do something meaningful and measurable with that. So let's start things off in terms of so first-party data is a foundation for a larger omni-channel marketing strategy that can help brands achieve lower funnel objectives such as customer loyalty, retention, and upselling. So to start things off, you really need to define your marketing and customer experience goals and objectives, alongside the tactics and analytics required to execute on that strategy. Start to create a roadmap for how your cross-channel marketing capabilities will develop over time, and break down the long-term effort into smaller projects that can demonstrate incremental ROI each stage. You then look to determine the right data sources and data points. So start to audit your data sources to identify what data is being generated and how it's being measured. Cross-reference your data sources and data points with requirements of your marketing and analytics use cases you plan to execute on. Also, make sure that you're collecting data that's important to your objectives. Next up, we really start to demand more from your data. So first-party data is critical for creating personal and meaningful customer experiences in any given context. So you need to start to integrate offline and online data into a company-wide customer data platform that can then allow you to start to drive customer-centric programs that align marketing, product, and service. Next up, we really sort of start to benchmark and monitor over time. So continually evaluate your first-party data capabilities, monitor progress, and integrate what you've learned to each step along the way. Identify key success metrics for your solution, both in terms of operational capability and support for cross-channel marketing objectives. Track data volumes, sources, processing speed, profile depth, and which data is activated for analytics and for measurement. So let's look at some of the ways that you can start to activate on some of this stuff. Once you've taken those steps, what do you do then? So firstly, the first thing to do is really align your data with your customer objectives. So data tells you what customers are doing, but it doesn't tell you why. User research fills in these gaps to better understand customer needs and expectations. So looking at stuff like motivations, anxieties, and value perception by the different segments that your current customers have. What holds most brands back from using data effectively is a lack of coordinated plan to guide choosing which data to collect and how to analyze and activate it. These goals can help you to differentiate between data that's required and data that's nice to have. From there, start to create a plan with measurable goals to guide which data you collect and invest in. Calculate the cost of acquiring that data, as well as the related complexities, such as compliance with privacy laws, risks of data breach, and the impact on customer trust. Creating meaningful value exchange. We all know about this, but often it's very difficult to articulate that in something that works for your customers. People want more transparency into how their data is being used online. When brands show that they're responsible with the data and use it to deliver value through exclusive offers and loyalty programs, then customers are more willing to share that information. As you're planning or reevaluating your first-party data strategy, an important question is to ask is, have we made it easier for customers to see the benefits of sharing their data with us? And that's a really important question. Consent management is the key consideration here. If customers experience your brand through a website or app, for example, incorporating consent forms into the user experience should be your priority. Look at benefits-led productization, value-based opt-in opportunities, and place user research at the heart of the decision-making process around those points. Make it easier for your customers to understand what they're getting, the value of that, whether it's important to them, and have numerous different ways which users can engage, opt-in, and increase the level of engagement that they have with your brand. Lastly, another way to maintain customer trust is through strong data governance, by managing data properly and implementing processes that ensure data accuracy and integrity. You can avoid data breaches while improving data accuracy, timelines, and usability. Tech stack and enablement, big piece there. I mean, typically with a lot of the time it's, well, I've got this new tool and this will definitely solve all my problems. That's not always the case. So putting the right people, technology, and processes in place is key to getting the most out of your first party data. A great starting point is assessing your digital marketing maturity and identifying opportunities to increase this. The ideal organizational model is a hybrid approach where a brand takes data ownership and develops key capabilities relating to data analysis and activation internally, and then works with a trusted partner to start to fill the expertise gaps. So bringing in a partner can really help you skip months or even years of trial and error by applying best practices, models, and frameworks from day one while you look to grow your own internal capability stack. Most important, certainly from our point of view, is experiment. Once you've determined which first-party data is most meaningful for you, it's how you collect it, how you manage it. Then you can focus on how you use first-party data to improve the customer experience. While many brands aim for one-to-one personalization, the time and investment required to pull that together can be significant. So we found a test and learn approach to assess the level of personalization needed for specific audience segments is an effective way to start to assess the activation types and will help you to achieve your marketing objectives. The idea is to prove value quickly with narrow use cases and iterate and learn. We did something a good example of this is something we did with Wall Street Journal. Their internal data teams identified numerous micro actions and measured which of these had an impact on retention. This allowed us then to begin to experiment and optimize around those behaviors, starting to create habits which drove retention and customer lifetime value growth. So to sum things up, by leveraging all of your brand's first-party data to resolve identity, marketers can start to build a data asset that serves as the foundation for all customer engagements across the web, mobile apps, stores, email, ads, call centers, and beyond. Equipped with this intelligence, marketers can amplify reach across channels, build better customer relationships, improve retention rates, and increase brand revenues. Any questions? If not, I will hand over to Janice, who's going to talk us through how she built a successful social community.
Thank you so much for that, Osh. Sorry, a slight technical hitch there. So yes, I'm Janice Thomas. I am the e-commerce and marketing director at Look Fabulous Forever, and I'm going to talk to you today about how you can supercharge your strategy with social. So what difference does successful social make anyway? So for us at Look Fabulous Forever, in the last year, we have seen a 350% increase in our revenue from social. It's gone from representing 4% of our revenue in 2020 to 15% so far this year. and we have a social community, which I'm going to go on to talk about in a little bit more detail, our net promoter score for that community is 76, compared with 60 for customers who aren't members of that community. And what's interesting is that for our customers who know that we have a social community but have chosen not to join it, our NPS is 65. So just having the community, even if people don't participate, is improving their perception of us as a brand. So let me give you a little bit of background on Look Fabulous Forever. Our founder, Trisha Cusden, started the brand back in 2013. She was 65 at the time, so she's 73 now, and just the most incredible force of nature. And essentially what she found was, as she got older, the makeup and skincare products that she used became less effective for her, particularly after she'd been through menopause. And what she found is, as she looked around at mainstream brands and retailers, they just weren't catering to older women. That as far as they were concerned, older women is anyone over about 30. And actually women in their 60s and 70s are chronically underserved by this sector. So she said, essentially, if those products are not out there to help me, then I'm going to make them myself, set up everything, manufacturing, website, all of those things. And the company has gone from strength to strength. And social has always been a core part of our strategy. This is something that Trisha could really understand straight away, that she's always had a YouTube channel. We've now got hundreds of videos and thousands of subscribers and millions of views. We started our social community, Trisha's Super Troopers, on the 20th of March, 2020. I think you might be able to guess what triggered that. And we've focused, since I joined the company, on growing revenue through social, because this is very much a pattern that I've seen in previous roles, particularly when I worked at Birchbox. We drove the majority of our revenue from social, and I very much believe that brands that are not driving a significant amount of revenue from social are missing a trick, because they're just not doing it in the right way, because it's not difficult. So let me tell you a little bit about our community. So Trisha realized when we went into the first lockdown, our customers were disproportionately affected, that the majority of them are retired, so their lives essentially were built around, it might be family or grandchildren or volunteer work or meeting friends for lunch and coffee and all of those things. And suddenly that all went away for them absolutely overnight. And that Trisha felt very isolated herself and recognized that her customers would feel very much in the same boat. So she started this community, and it was predominantly about a place where these women could come together and talk about how they felt about their current situation, about how much they missed their grandchildren and wish they could hug them and all of those things. And Trisha did a daily video every day for the first 3 months, so hundreds of videos to really get our community through that period. And from there was a very organic discussion of our products. It was predominantly as a kind of social thing to kind of support them and to meet each other, but the kind of product side happened very much organically. And what I found really interesting is our customers are generally not women who feel comfortable sharing selfies on social media, but because it's such a warm and inclusive, closed, private community, that they feel that they can really ask their fellow members for advice and their input and all of those things, and they're very willing to share the impact that our products have on them. And what's amazing is we have about 6,500 members, and over 90% of them are active in the group each month. So it's very much continued beyond lockdown to be something that is a key part of our customers' lives. And on the paid social side, I think where I see potential, and I think businesses who maybe aren't driving enough revenue from social, is that you really have to they're generally either doing one thing or the other. They're either doing the education and awareness piece, or they're doing the bottom of funnel conversion. And where Facebook works best from a paid perspective is actually where you're doing that full funnel, that you take people on the journey, that we tell people about Trisha's story and why she started the brand. We have a color quiz that helps you understand what particular makeup colors are going to suit you, which is really important when buying color makeup products online and you can't test them in person, and various tutorials and tips that help our customers look their best with those products. And we accompany that with bottom of funnel, dynamic product ads, product specific advertising, offers, all of those things to take people on a journey to when they first find out about the brand to eventually making their first purchase and then subsequent purchases. And in fact, one of our most successful Facebook campaigns is where we take the people that we have reached with our education and awareness campaigns and then retarget them with conversion opportunities. And personalization is a really key part of this strategy that when I joined the business, it became apparent that the main way that we were going to be able to grow revenue more successfully was to increase our conversion. And one of the reasons our conversion was low was that our homepage was trying to do everything for everyone. And we had these different consumers with different needs, and we were trying to do everything in that one page. And there were certain things that we knew were really important, that particularly for people who haven't bought from us before, they need to understand why we exist, because our proposition is very different from anything they'll find from mainstream brands. So Trisha's story, how our different products work, why they work for older women versus traditional products, and that storytelling and content is really key to people who don't know our brand. But if you already know us and you've already bought from us before, you know all of that, and you don't want that getting in your way because you want to get into products or content or those kind of things, and you have a very different requirement from our website. We also have personalized recommendations that, particularly, for example, if you're a first-time buyer from us, you're very unlikely to buy skincare from us. You're much more likely to buy makeup, and it's probably going to be one of our best-selling products, either our primers, which really help makeup stay vibrant on mature skin, so they're a really core part of our proposition, or a kind of traditional kind of lipstick or eyeshadow. Whereas if you're a returning visitor, you're probably going to get into some of our more niche products, and you're definitely more likely to buy skincare from us, particularly if you bought skincare before, then you're going to have a replenishment cycle. And so the products that we're recommending to you, depending on who you are very different. We also have personalized offers based on, you might be a first-time visitor, you might be someone who has bought from us but not for a while. We have different propositions for different people's at different stages of their life cycle, and that's a key part of our social experience, is where you've come from and who you are will impact what you see when you visit our website. So in conclusion, we've seen huge success from our organic and paid social. It drives revenue for us both in the short term, but also lifetime value and advocacy long term. And we're just getting started on this journey. There is so much more for us to do, and I'm really excited to do it. So thank you so much for your time, and I will now hand over to Alex.
Cool, thank you, Janice. I will just share my screen. Great. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex, and I am an optimization strategist at Daydot. So today, I'm going to talk to you about personalization and how to use personalization to create better digital experiences on your site. So I want to really kickstart the sort of talking about personalization with really the importance of understanding your customers. Making sure that you aren't making any assumptions about their needs or goals is absolutely vital. So you need to be able to understand your customers' motivations and what influences their decisions. So then you can start to create the correct strategy to answer questions around what is most relevant to them and how can you make the most effective experience for them. So often you see this kind of strain between business needs and customer needs. So businesses often will plow ahead with strategies that will help them achieve their KPIs, but without really thinking about what that means for the customer. What's the customer view of that? So businesses might need to get a certain amount of people to subscribe to their magazine or newspaper, or they might need to shift a certain amount of stock by the end of the month. But really, customers don't care about that. What they care about is making sure that they're getting what they're looking for quickly, easily, and it's at the right price for them. So that's why it's really important to find out what your customers' needs are and see where these needs complement your business strategy. So that's how you can combine these goals and create something that works for both the business and the customer. So along your journey flows, this is a typical journey here. Understanding the different needs at different points is really important. So a customer's needs will change at the awareness stage versus at the retention or loyalty stage. So starting off with some journey mapping can help you understand what key information your customer needs at each stage to successfully move through that funnel. So how do we do that? Well, really, it's all about research. So I'm just going to talk through sort of top level different research techniques that you can use to start to understand your customers a bit better. So you're probably all aware of analytics data. This is obviously a really useful way to identify where issues are happening on your site along the funnel. So what type of behavior is happening? Where are users dropping off? Where are they engaging with your site? Analytics is really good at that. What analytics isn't so good at is telling you why it's happening. So you can make an educated guess. Maybe on your checkout, you've got high drop off because you realize that a particular form isn't working, or there's a particular field that's really confusing. So you could make a guess. But the issue with that is you can make a guess and you could set up a test that ultimately to try and fix that, but ultimately it doesn't really end up with a solid conclusion or result that's significant. And that's because that hypothesis that you had was never really well thought out. It was based off a hunch of, well, this is happening, maybe if we fix this. But really, you need to speak to the customers, because otherwise you can spend a lot of time and effort, which is going to cost your business a lot of money. So how do we start to really talk to our customers? So there's a lot of research methodologies out there. I'm sure you've seen a lot of these in your time. But what these do is they allow you to speak to real customers, talk to them, ask them directly how they use your products, what other products they might be using, but also not only your own customers, but also prospects, potential customers. Speak to them as well. So what other products are they using? What other services are they using? And why are they not using yours? This is how you're really going to get to understand your customers and to start to paint a picture of what it is you need to present to them in order for them to get benefit out of your product. So just going through these in top level. So heuristic analysis. This is basically a first step for research. Research doesn't have to be overly complex. This is a sort of entry-level way of doing some analysis of your site, and it's often a good place to begin. So what a heuristic analysis is essentially it's an expert review of a site, which will give you some qualitative findings that can be used to help identify areas of strength and areas of weakness that need to be improved. So at Daydot, we have a heuristic analysis framework that we use, and we often go through specific conversion levers and identify along the funnel of a site, where is a website falling down in those conversion levers. And within those levers, you might start to look at things like information hierarchy. So how is the content laid out? Is it laid out in the right way? What's missing from that content? The copy, is it succinct? Does it make sense? And then also the content relevance. Are things displayed where you'd expect them to be displayed for? Is the mental model as you'd expect? But then we can gradually start to get a bit more complex with our research and go a bit deeper. So we can then start to talk to customer services. So these are the people that talk to your customers every day, dealing with their issues and their questions. So they will have a lot of key information that is vital to, it would be so useful, it would be like gold for what you're trying to solve. Online reviews, this takes a bit more time and work, but essentially scouring across the internet and finding reviews of your products or whatever it might be, and read the details of what people are saying. You can then start to identify certain themes of what's coming up. And then there's session replays. So this is essentially session recordings of users using your site. And you might start, once you've watched a few of these, to, again, realize certain themes of where users are struggling, where they're going back and forth, where might they be dropping off. But then the most detailed, again, in terms of research for customers, is things like surveys, interviews, and usability testing. So this is where you're going to get a lot of great information. Surveys are essentially, you can just ask a specific question that you want a real response to on your site. Interviews allow you to dig deeper into these questions, and you can have a real conversation with customers around certain points which you know you want to optimize or certain points you want to grow. And then usability testing is very detailed and a great way to observe how customers are actually interacting with your site, what problems or unexpected scenarios they encounter. This type of research is pretty in depth, so it's worth enlisting the help of professionals that know how to do this sort of thing, as their skills are useful to craft questions and run the interview process as effectively and efficiently as it can be. So now we've spoken a little bit about how to understand your customers better and all the research methods. We're going to talk a little bit about personalization, which is a bit of a buzzword, but we're going to go into it and take it through sort of step by step on how to sort of kickstart personalization. So most of the businesses we talk to, when we talk about personalization, their view is to get to this one-on-one relevance. So something that is unique to every user, a site that every user that comes onto it each user has their own experience. But obviously that's really hard to get to, and that's quite overwhelming to think, oh, personalization is one-on-one, how do I get there? It's too much it's too big a hill to climb. And first of all, you also need to make sure that's what your customers want. Not every customer wants that one-on-one personalization. So research there is the key. So take small steps by creating more relevant experiences. Really, personalization is just increased relevance. So we can start quite broadly and then get more detailed as we work up to that one-on-one relevance. And the way we get more detailed and we get there is by doing research and testing, essentially. So as I said, it's quite a big mountain to climb. So how do we start it? So just sort of think of it as a crawl, walk, run approach. So first of all, you can start to optimize the base level experience. So just improving general relevance for all users. And then you can start to walk and begin to refine this by looking at different segments that will exhibit different behaviors. So a bit like Janice was mentioning on her site, new versus returning users, and presenting different content on the homepage based on who the user is. And then eventually you might want to start to move towards more one-on-one personalization, if there is a need for that, if that's come out of your research that customers want that. And at this stage, you would need to probably start to adopt some sort of AI solution where that can keep up with your customers and all the different behaviors that they exhibit and what they want in real time. So remember, it's important to think about that journey flow and use your customer research to find out where and when personalization or improved relevance would help your customer and provide something meaningful to the experience. So as I just mentioned about segments, you can start really small. Probably all thought about new and returning users before. So it's a good place to start if that's something that comes out of your research and your analytics, is just optimizing for returning versus new users. Often new users will be completely new to a product, so they'll need to have a value proposition that makes sense to them. They'll need introduction to the brand, the products, the service, whereas returning users obviously have been there before, so they might not need that as much. We could start to perhaps present some products to them straight away, and then maybe pepper in the value proposition throughout the funnel, just to remind them as they get further down. Another basic segment is mobile versus desktop, something we probably all think about all the time now, but behaviors do differ across desktop and mobile users. Purchasing behaviors differ across mobile and desktop users. So how do we start to think about these experiences and what do we put in front of users who are on a mobile versus users who are on a desktop? And then as time goes on, you can start to combine these things, add to this strategy as much as you need to. But really you want to start with just keeping it simple, like these sort of segments that I've just gone through, and take findings from your research and focus on the most valuable segments to target and also the most valuable places in your funnel to target. And before you know it, your personalization strategy starts to build up from there. So I think when you go through personalization, it's important though not just to do it for the sake of doing it. Yes, some customers do want it, some customers don't. but those customers that do want it, what's meaningful to them? Don't just put something in front of them because, you know, they went on a page the other day, so we're going to remember that they went on that page. Make it meaningful. And what is meaningful to that user. For example, here, this is an example of a website where it says handpicked for you, and then there's a bunch of clothes. Yes, that could be brilliant if that is actually personalization. So if I was looking for these clothes, great, okay, maybe that is good, but don't put it in front of the user if that's not true, or if that logic doesn't really make sense, because that can do more harm than good. And pretending that you know your customer when in fact you don't can seem that it's not authentic, and just shine a light on the fact how much you don't know your customer. And then on top of making it meaningful, you need to make it persuasive. So wherever possible, try to make sure that your personalization efforts are persuasive. So here, this is a really simple example of a website that's just added the name on top of the onto the homepage. Really simple stuff, but it's probably quite difficult for a lot of users a lot of websites to put a name on a homepage. But I think it's interesting to think about the example as a way to, and the copy it's used, that's used to try and encourage user to click through the name and the persuasive copy. Most users probably saw the same homepage just with a change of name. And I think that feels more personalized to the user, and ultimately it feels more persuasive. You've probably seen it a lot in emails. We often see our name in emails, and then an offer, sort of a FOMO trigger like last chance or 20% off for retargeting users that have left something in their basket to encourage them to come back at checkout. That's quite a common technique that we see these days. But as with all of these techniques, they work for some brands, they don't work for other brands. So it's really important to test them and make sure that they work for your customers. It might not work for your customers, it might turn them off completely. So that's why the research is so important, and to test it. So now I'm going to talk a little bit, just finish up and talking a little bit about testing. So once you've done all your research, you'll probably have a bunch of ideas and you won't really know where to start. So that's why prioritization of those ideas is really, really important. At Daydot, we use a prioritization model, and we tailor that depending on the client and their needs. And these can take into account the customer problem, but also the business objectives and the value of that problem to the business. And then ranking these ideas is a really sort of great way of just, okay, I can start here and work my way down, essentially. You might have some ideas that are just do it. So you don't really need to test this stuff. Either it's a broken form, or it's something that's so obvious you should just do it, versus things that you need to experiment. So you want to test these changes as an A/B test before implementing them to measure their impact. And that's essentially the sort of the two categories that it can fall in. So really, in order to go through personalization, you need to just keep optimizing and keep iterating and going through the cycle. The learnings from one test should feed into future tests so that you can keep improving the relevance and create the best experience for your customers. So once you've completed your first test, you can go through the analysis steps again at regular intervals. Has anything changed? Has anything improved? You can re-audit your site and your competitors. What have they changed? You can keep looking for new information analytics. So since you've implemented a change or during a test, can you see a change in analytics? Is there a reduced drop-off, etc.? And then you iterate all of that and keep analyzing and learning and see where you can identify new hypotheses to test. And lastly, just before I finish off, everything is always changing. So just because you find a winning test or winning strategy, that doesn't mean it's going to last forever. You'll need to reiterate on that and keep going and put it back into the cycle. So doing regular research, finding out how your customer needs have changed, keeping up to date with the industry and expectations, a bit like Osh was talking about with first-party data, which is more of an expectation now. And don't worry about when you test making all the experiences perfect. Obviously, this does depend on sort of internal politics at a company, but you're really just testing it to see how your customers react. So it doesn't need to be perfect. Just making small improvements and iterating on those is really what we're trying to get to. And that is it from me. So I think now I'm handing over. I know there were some technical difficulties, so I'm not sure if everyone is here.
Yeah, Cara is available. So Cara, if you want to share your screen, that'd be great.
Hi everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. My name's Cara Segadin. I'm the Head of Digital Marketing at WildBrain Spark, and today I'm going to be talking to you about 3 digital trends that I think would be interesting and maybe a little bit of inspiration for you to look at for your digital marketing plans for 2022. So just a little introduction to who we are. I don't expect too many of you know about WildBrain, but we are a children's and family entertainment company based out of Canada, and we also have offices all around the world. We cover everything from content development to production to distribution, brand building, as well as licensing. So WildBrain Spark, we are the digital hub of WildBrain based out of London. We run the largest kids and family AVOD network on YouTube, AVOD being advertising video on demand. And we work with brands and companies, and we work with our own internal brands as well to build out sort of digital experiences for children. We run ad networks. We do a lot of digital first production as well. And some of the biggest brands that we work on that you've probably heard of before are things like Teletubbies, Peanuts, and the Night Garden. We also make a few shows for Netflix as well, such as Chip and Potato. And a little bit about me. So I joined WildBrain back in January, and I'm heading up digital marketing here at the company. It's a new role as we look to expand our digital and brand offering. I came from 6 years at BBC Studios, looking after digital marketing and digital publishing for our factual portfolio. And before that, I spent a number of years working in the travel industry. So today I want to go over, like I said before, 3 sort of thought starters for your marketing plans. And this will cover everything from YouTube over to TikTok. But I think while I've broken this out into sort of maybe the generation where this focus could benefit the most, I'd say here there's a lot of for you to use, no matter who you're working with. So I think some of you may have seen a slide like this before. This graph sort of gets refreshed every year. And this is what's happening every minute of the day on the internet. And the reason I wanted to show this to you is I think it highlights quite nicely sort of the demands that are on both our audience and us as marketers. So first, it highlights that every single year there is just more and more content, more and more platforms, more and more distractions that we have to fight against and find our place within. And also as marketers, it means there are so many more options for us when it comes to spending our marketing budgets each year. And I think the main takeaway, which sort of covers everything I'm going to talk about, is that in this world with endless platforms, more and more formats, knowing your brand, your business objectives, and your audience is more important than ever before. We can't be everywhere at once, but when we choose where we want to be, I think having all that information at the core of everything is even more critical. So the first group I'm going to talk about is Generation Alpha. So this might not be familiar to a lot of you, but they are well within our wheelhouse here at WildBrain and WildBrain Spark. So this generation is generally around 9 years and younger. They are what we've called the streaming generation. So here at WildBrain Spark, we created a report this last year. It's available to download online for free. And it sort of breaks down how we reach this audience and the types of things that are important to them, and also what it means to reach them. So one of the most important things for reaching this audience is quality and being trustworthy, as you'd imagine. So we're not just speaking to these under 9s, we're also speaking to their parents. And we saw in the last 2 years that their changing habits towards streaming over watching content like live on television has changed dramatically, and it's just sped up what was already happening. That family co-viewing on smart TV is on the rise, and that predominantly that is spent on Netflix, but YouTube and YouTube Kids is sort of in that second position. And the reason that is important is it's hard for us to reach children and their families. And with a service like Netflix and Disney Plus and all of these things coming and just growing, those subscription-based video services, as advertisers and marketers, we can't get in front of them as easily through that route. But YouTube and YouTube Kids at that 61% mark, that is the opportunity where we can reach parents and their children. One thing we also found from our report is that Generation Alpha have more influence on their parents' spending decisions than in previous generations. That sort of is reflective of maybe the more open and less hierarchical way that parents work within their families these days. And as I said before, AVOD is a really good way for us to reach this generation and their parents. So just a little fact here that around 74% of UK families are now watching content with their kids every week, and 30%, the 6% are doing that daily. So obviously YouTube is a really critical space for us to reach parents and children and also families as a whole. So a few things about YouTube that if you haven't been too familiar with what's happening in the space is really good for you to understand. In January last year, Facebook rolled out their Made for Kids sort of advertising proposition. So they removed the ability to target children in the same way you might be able to on Facebook and Instagram, and made that completely based around interest. So you can place your advertising on different channels and on different types of content, but we can't sort of go after individuals at the child level. So all these changes were great. It means YouTube is a much safer space, and it means children are treated, in the way that they should be. And what that has meant, though, is that companies and content creators need to be a lot smarter and a lot more thoughtful with how they create content and advertise on the platform. Then again, in September this year, YouTube announced a series of quality principles that apply to all children's content, and it's designed to bring up sort of the more professional, the better quality, and the things that we really want children to be seeing, while also sort of not hiding or removing, but making it harder to find that lower quality content, things that are incredibly commercial, they could be misleading, or showing children behaviors that, no one or parents don't want them to see. And the reason these quality principles are good, I think as an industry, it makes us, it keeps YouTube a safe space, and it means that also you're giving quality content to children and families. What this means for brands and content creators, that you can still advertise across the network, you can still advertise to children, but you need to be a lot smarter and a lot more practical about how you go about it. When it comes to making content for children on these platforms or for families, brand building and long-term vision is the key. So nothing overtly commercial. You've got to start thinking about telling a story. And I think that's where your brand and your brand values really can be demonstrated to to the most that you can get out of them. And one good rule of thumb is to think, would it pass the TV test? If you were a TV commissioner and a piece of content came to you, would you consider that like good quality value editorial, or more of a promotional advertising type of piece? So I think with YouTube, something to think about is there a family audience we need to reach? Are there things we can do within the advertising network? And then also, is there anything we can do organically with content, thinking about long-term brand building objectives? Then the next generation is one you've probably heard a little bit about, which is Generation Z. This is the slightly older group who are what we would truly say the people who grew up and can't remember a time before the internet. So they grew up on influencers, they grew up on YouTube, and I think that's what's critical here about talking to this audience. So they are more likely to go to social than search engines when they're looking up into researching brands. They're also more likely to discover brands via creators and influencer endorsements, and they're least likely to follow businesses on social media. And that brings me to YouTube Shorts, which is something I'd imagine not too many companies are still maybe a bit wary of going onto YouTube. It is in the past has been quite a time heavy and resource heavy platform to create content for. But I think YouTube Shorts is a really interesting proposition, particularly if you're reaching into the Gen Z audience, because it will help you tap into the community. There are an existing network of influencers and creators here who you could partner with, but it's also a great place to potentially build out your own brand and company offering. So the reasons this is something you might want to consider, exactly what I said, the audience is there. Gen Z, this is the platform they grew up with. Their influencers, their creators, their favorite stars are on here. Also, YouTube is an incredibly strong search engine in itself. So in the past, creating long form YouTube content might not have been realistic for a lot of companies, but now with these short 15-second up to 1 minute shorts, you can sort of have a lot more room to test, and there's a much lower barrier to entry, but then you still benefit from being in the YouTube search engine, from that community and that existing audience. Also, it's a priority for YouTube. So this is something they want more and more people to start using. It's their direct competitor to TikTok and to Instagram Reels. So people publishing content into this sort of new category are more likely to be served within the algorithm. It's also, yeah, as I said, access to the creators and influencers that we know younger audiences are so inspired by. And the content can also easily transfer to, say, a TikTok account or an Instagram account you're already running. So it is real good value for money, as well as being a great place to reach this audience. The next one is millennials, who you're probably already starting to think quite a lot about in your marketing plans. They are, I guess, the first sort of digital native audience, and now are obviously growing up and having families of their own, settling into maybe a slightly more adult life. But that doesn't mean that they necessarily want to be too adult, and they're starting to reach into the TikTok generation, which I guess for a lot of us has been seen as the under 24s. There is a lot of growth happening now in that 24 plus age range. And for TikTok themselves, they are looking to age up their platform. So they are really interested in encouraging brands, creators, individuals who are going to bring in that slightly older audience for them. It's also being underused by brands, I'd say. So there's a lot of room to experiment, and to grow your niche and sort of show off your brand values, what your brand knows, and to tap into the existing communities there. So I'm going to play out a few examples. If they don't play now, I will share a link. But I think a lot of the really interesting stuff that's happening here is from smaller businesses who are finding their unique niches on the platform. So this first clip is from a bookstore, and they have sort of found their way into book TikTok and are now doing like really nice and really successful, simple, short clips here. So it can stream from anything from this very simple content up to an account like Chipotle, who have really invested heavily into creating a very cute, very funny, and very of the platform TikTok account. And then the next example is another way to work with audiences that are going to tap into, to work with creators who are going to tap into our audience, millennials. So there's an increase here of, say, parenting influencers on the platform, slightly older users as well who have created their own following and are now doing sort of branded content opportunities. So this is one for a Heinz Halloween store using two of Instagram's most popular parenting and family influencers. And I guess what all of this sort of shows you is that there is a lot of room now on these social platforms with all this sort of congestion and all these various routes to finding your audience, that the key here really is knowing your brand, knowing your values, knowing what you need to achieve, and then also knowing your audience inside and out. And I think what's really exciting about the possibilities of TikTok and on YouTube at the moment with YouTube Shorts is they offer you a real opportunity to experiment and to try new things, but also to, rather than feeling the need anymore to build up our own communities from scratch, there are so many communities out there who are, overlapping with our audience either directly or indirectly, where we can start tapping into the video and the content that is being created either by our fans or by official sort of influencers as well. So I think my main takeaways and my main tips are dive into some of these new platforms where there is a lot of rich sort of opportunity and they haven't been overexploited yet by brands and companies, to get really experimental, but get to the heart of what your brand and your company really stand for and where is the expertise you can offer on these platforms. And it's finally working with talent and influencers, using the people who have built their communities up around them and are native to these platforms as well. And I think gone are the days maybe where we need to be everywhere all at once, into being a lot more strategic and a lot more smart about where we spend our money and where we publish our videos. And that was a complete whistle-stop tour, and I really just hope this has given you something to think about and like I said, my email is right here at the very end. So if you do ever have any questions or just want to chat, I am a complete geek about all of this stuff. So always willing to have a chat to a fellow digital marketer. So thank you.
We do have some questions at the moment, so I will kind of go for those. Hopefully those people haven't dialed off yet, but if people could turn their video and camera and unmute when I pose them. I think, Janice, you've got a fair few. So the first one, well, actually this is Janice and Alex. I'm not quite sure who is best to answer this, but there was a question about how are customers able to receive personalized website content. So I know, Janice, you sort of posted a reply on there. So how are they doing it? Is it logins, cookies, landing pages? Some of those examples you shared, Alex, I think.
I can, yeah. So as you said, a lot of it is sort of logins, IPs, that sort of thing. But going back to sort of what Osh was talking about, also is first-party data. So how can you collect first-party data and use it in an effective way? So an example might be when you sign up to something new and you subscription, there could be an onboarding process whereby you go through and ask users questions about how they intend to use the product, why they intend to use it, they intend to use it on weekends, what sort of content are they interested in. A bit like Netflix does when you sign up to Netflix and you select all the different films that you've watched, haven't watched. That is collecting data in a way that can then be used to personalize your website experience.
Great, thank you. I don't know if you've got anything to add, Janice, you kind of answered that as well, but there was a question about where would you start with paid social?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. If brands aren't doing it, the simplest thing is dynamic product ads, which is essentially if you've got an existing product feed that you'd use for Google Shopping or whatever, you just can plug that into Facebook with a simple line of copy and retarget your website visitors. You know, that is the most basic thing, requires no creative, technical integration. You probably already got, you can be up and running in a matter of minutes. If you're not doing that, you're missing a trick. And particularly Facebook now have a bidding strategy around minimum ROAS. So you can say, I only want to spend if you can generate me 5 times more revenue than I'm spending, and you can just let it run. There's no reason not to do it. It's free money.
Good tips there, that's great. And also I know there was a conversation going on about social growth and what drives the biggest impact there. I know you answered, Janice, it depends on what you term social growth. Perhaps you can elaborate on that a bit more, and what channels drive which the most?
Yeah, so for us, we obviously we track things like likes and followers and things like that, but that's not really what we're about. We're about, well, what difference does it make? Which is why for us, actually, with our social community, our metrics are things like what's our net promoter score for that group, what percentage are engaged with the group each month, and things like that, that we care less about, the vanity numbers, but more the difference that it makes to our business.
Right, and then a question for Alex. So can you share an example of personalization testing that we've done, like a specific example?
Yes, I guess similar to what I was just saying, actually. So we've done some testing for the Wall Street Journal, which is on their onboarding experience. So when you sign up to the Wall Street Journal, there's a number of different features they want you to know about. So whether that be puzzles, certain authors, newsletters, that sort of thing. They've identified that if users use these, they're sort of existing members, they've realized from analyzing their data that those existing members that use these features tend to stay longer, and it helps reduce churn. So we created an onboarding experience where we presented these features, but instead of just presenting all of them, because there's so many, we started to ask questions for users about how they intend to read the Wall Street Journal. Is it on their mobile when they're on their way to work? Is it in the evenings when they're on their laptop? And start to get an understanding of what features we should put in front of them based on information they've told us there.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you to all of our speakers this morning. I think I'm just going to scan my other screen here. I don't think we've got any other questions come through. So thank you so much for joining us. Please reach out if you've got any questions or anything occurs to you after the webinar. Look out for the recording and the survey and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.